Emekli CIA analisti Larry Johnson, ABD Dışişleri Bakanlığı bünyesindeki Terörle Mücadele Ofisi Başkan Yardımcılığı da yaptı. Terör, uçuş güvenliği, kriz ve risk yönetimi konularında uzmanlığı olan Johnson, CIA'de çalıştığı dönemde 2 üstün hizmet madalyası kazandı. Hükümetlere ve şirketlere kara para aklama ve terör tehditleri konusunda danışmanlık sağlayan Burke Associates isimli bir şirket kurdu. Temmuz 1996'da Viyana'daki Terörle Mücadele Konferansı'nda ABD'yi temsil etti. 1988'de Penem 103 uçağına yapılan terör saldırısının soruşturmasında yer aldı. Nisan 2024'te Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'ne Kuzey Akım 2 boru hattına yapılan saldırıyla ilgili bir konuşma yaptı. ABC, NBC, Fox News ve CNN gibi büyük medya kuruluşlarında terör olaylarıyla ilgili yorumlar yaptı. Paris École Polytechnique'deki Araştırma ve Stratejik Çalışmalar Merkezi de dahil olmak üzere birçok okulda terörizm ve uçuş güvenliği üzerine dersler verdi.
Hello everyone. Today we are together with Mr. Larry C. Johnson. He's a ex-CIA intel analyst. He worked for the agency for 24 years, and today he's together with us. Welcome, sir.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, I worked for the agency for 4 years, and then I was with the State Department for 4 years.
Then I'd like to start with the breaking news that we have on the operation that Israel has on Rafah right now.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate to start yesterday, and even now that it turned into a humanitarian crisis, there was a serious amount of pressure that's been created by international communities, especially the United Nations Security Council was pressuring Israel to have a ceasefire on Gaza. And even though the United States abstained from the vote, Biden administration has repeated its unhappiness with how things were conducted by the Israeli forces in Gaza. So right now we are seeing a terrible situation from a humanitarian perspective. And what kind of consequences that Israel is going to face for pursuing this? And mind you, there was a peace deal that was pursued yesterday.
Right.
Hamas accepted the peace deal, but right after, maybe even in a couple hours later, Israel started the attack on Rafah. So what kind of consequences do you think Israel is going to face?
Well, I don't think they're going to face any unless particularly the Arab and Muslim countries in the Middle East band together to say this is going to stop, and it's going to stop now. I know that Turkey finally suspended trade with Israel. I don't know if that includes the oil. If the oil is still flowing through Turkey to Israel, then in that sense, Turkey's enabling the murder of the Palestinians. It's as complicit in the crime as the Israelis are. And similarly with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, it's one thing to sit back and express shock and outrage, but to not combine effectively together to say, look, this can't be allowed. And to bring Syria into it and Lebanon. Because really up to this point, the only country that has been standing up on behalf of the Palestinian people and fighting are the Houthis in Yemen. Everybody else talks a good game, but doesn't do much. It took the loss of an election in Turkey for President Erdogan finally to step up and do something besides just, he's great at talking. How about doing? I think people need to understand that Israel they're not looking for a negotiated settlement. The only way a negotiated settlement is going to be achieved is if Israel's existence is at threat. Because Israel's intent on exterminating the Palestinians from Gaza. They're going to clean them out. They're going to force them out. Same in the West Bank. Despite all of the UN resolutions, despite all of the charges that it's an illegal occupation, Israel is possessed of these Zionist extremists that are beyond reason. They are, the same kind of mentality that we've seen with brutal authoritarians through history. and so they're not looking for a negotiated way out. So unless Hamas is able to prevail militarily, which I don't think they can, because they don't have the air power and they don't have air defense systems. All they have are small arms and some anti-tank guided missiles, and maybe a few other rockets, missiles that could be fired, but they're really not consequential. It's going to take outside intervention. Now, there is a report that the Biden administration supposedly has suspended arms shipments to Israel, and it's being portrayed as they're doing that as a punishment or as a way to express displeasure with what Israel's doing. That may be true, or it may be just the fact that the United States has run out of armaments and doesn't have any to ship. And then they're taking advantage of that scarcity to justify, to create an impression that they're doing something to try to put pressure on Israel.
Okay. So you are saying that the United States might be running out of ammo for Israel, but considering that a different kind of war being fought in Ukraine right now, do you think they're using the same type of ammunition that could be useful in Ukraine?
Well, sure. I mean, so for example, if you're talking a Patriot missile battery, you have the actual vehicles and the launchers that are on those vehicles, but you also have the missiles that go in them. So the bulk of the Patriots that were sent to Ukraine have been destroyed. And so there is no supply of new Patriot batteries that can be sent to Ukraine from the United States because we haven't made them. And they're not going to be made. It's not like they can sit down and tell a factory, hey, start making these and let's have them in 2 weeks. No, that's not going to happen. And the same thing with the missiles that go inside, or the rockets that go inside those Patriot missile batteries that are fired from the launchers. There's a shortage of those too. Right now you've seen that the United States is going around begging other countries that have bought Patriot systems in the past to get them and send them to Ukraine. So now the Patriot doesn't bother the Israelis. They've got Iron Dome, but again, they've got the same problem with Iron Dome. They don't have a limitless supply of the interceptor missiles or rockets that they can, deploy in the event of some like a new Iranian attack. Same 155 millimeter artillery shells. There is a definite shortage of those, and the United States was unable to keep pace with what Ukraine needed, and that was before the start of this war on October 7th. So now they're really up against it. So shortages of that, ammunition. I noticed, the Israelis were requesting at one point the United States sell combat rifles, automatic rifles to them, which to me didn't make sense because the Israeli arms industry is quite good and builds a large number of combat rifles. So it's like, why aren't you buying them from yourselves? Why are you wanting to get a U.S. product? That'd be like Turkey coming to the United States saying, "Hey, sell us shotguns." I mean, you guys make shotguns that are being sold all over America.
Yeah. But regarding how the United States is supporting Israel and how Israel is going to conduct the operation in Rafah, do you think Hamas can be defeated completely by Israel? Because we have seen at least a 7 months, 8 months of conflict. And
Right.
According to the reports, we are seeing that only 1 in 3 of Hamas fighters has been eliminated. So there are concerns by many American experts that Hamas cannot be defeated by Israel.
Well, yeah, they can't be militarily defeated unless Israel commits to the complete extermination of every Palestinian. Now, that would put, I think Israel already is in the camp of being equated with the Nazis in terms of what the Nazis did to the Jews. And now here you have Jews doing the same kind of things to Palestinians. who, let's be honest, if you believe the Torah, if you believe the Quran, if you believe in the Old Testament of the Bible, Palestinians and the Jews are distant relatives. They come from the same bloodline. They come from Abraham. And, so here they are, brother killing brother. That is, that is a mortal sin. And yet Israel persists in it. So they think they can kill their way out of this. They can't. And even if, let's just say that somehow they managed to completely stop all of the guerrilla attacks and insurgent attacks from Hamas, that's not going to make their country any more secure, because there's still Hezbollah. And Israel, frankly, I don't think is militarily strong enough to defeat Hezbollah. Hamas is, a different animal, because Hamas, while they have a number of trained fighters, they're not really organized as an army. And let's recognize that in the entire history of Hamas, going back to like 1979, when its first beginnings, they've never had this many Palestinians killed in any engagement. Israel is slaughtering Palestinians in an unprecedented level. It's approaching 40,000. And what's particularly sickening is the children that are being burned and blown to bits and shot. And just the Israeli, I find the entire Israeli conduct in this just disgusting. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have cited myself as a supporter of Israel. No longer. I think they are a disgrace to humanity, what they become. I'm not even sure that the Zionist state deserves to continue to exist, because of how they are conducting themselves with a complete disregard for human life. And, when they say, oh, Hamas is this awful terrorist group, I actually went and looked at the numbers. The numbers tell a damning story. From 2000 to 2024 in April, the Hamas terrorist attacks carried out and killed maximum 1,455 Israelis, with a majority of those being soldiers and policemen and settlers who were attacking Palestinians. So these were not unarmed people. 1,455 over 24 years. Works out about 60 a year. Then look at what Israel is doing now. Closing in on 40,000 dead men, women, and children. And the number of dead children is in excess of 15,000. It's a horror, and it shouldn't be allowed. And yet, we've seen this before. When the Houthis, the Hutus and the Tutsis were murdering each other in Rwanda, the world sat silent. When the Jews were slaughtered by the Nazis, the world sat silent. And now this is taking place to the Palestinians, and there's some protest here and there. Maybe the only hope is that there are enough student protests around the world that they put enough pressure on the governments to finally compel them to act. Otherwise, I think, Israel's going to keep murdering Palestinians.
Yeah. Well, you were saying that if I would ask you 2 years ago about Israel's on your position about Israel, you would say that you would be a supporter, right, of the country. But is this the first time that Israel is committing atrocities in Gaza? I mean, haven't they done this plenty of times already?
Not on this scale. This is really, going out and shooting 2 or 3 unarmed people every 3 months. Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous. I'm not saying it's okay, but it's something, it becomes tolerable. It reaches a level of say, oh, maybe you can explain it as just an aberration. It was a couple of soldiers or a particular unit that got out of control. But now we're seeing for the last going on 7 months that it's something different. This is a sickness, a psychological sickness on the part of the Israelis. They do not see the Palestinians as human beings, for starters. They see them as subhumans, cockroaches that have to be stepped on, that have to be killed, exterminated. And they, you've heard multiple Israeli, both officials in and out of government, say that every Palestinian is a Hamas fighter. 3-month-old babies are Hamas fighters. And, when you look, this is one of sort of the curious things about our language. We like to say, oh, they're a terrorist group, implying that they behave like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. ISIS and Al-Qaeda were two genuinely what I'd call international terrorist organizations, which meant they aspired to conduct operations outside of a particular geographic region. And they had enough of an international organization that they could carry out attacks. But Hamas is not that. Hamas is a national liberation organization. They are not. They're not adherents to the Muslim Brothers, although they adhere to Islam. But they are not what I would call Islamic radicals insisting that you must convert to Islam in order to live in Palestine or you will be destroyed, because there are Palestinian Christians there as well. And so Hamas is a different animal from the what the media's popular portrayal of the international Islamic terrorist. And and as we've seen over the last almost getting close to 20 years, ISIS has been attacking Shia Muslims. And, the ISIS, one of its biggest targets has been Iran, which is in part explains why the West can be seen as an enabler of ISIS, because they view ISIS as a tool to attack Iran. And the ISIS motivation is purely a bastardization of Islam, where they violate the very tenets and principles of Islam.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So since the 2022, the war started, and we have seen and heard comments from the Western analysts that Russia is going to run out of ammunition very soon. They're going to run out of shells. They are going to run out of mechanized vehicles, and the collapse is soon. Meanwhile, on the other side, a similar sentiment was in Russian analysts as well. They weren't expecting Ukraine to put the resistance that they put so far. So both sides turned out to be more resilient than expected. Now that we are hearing a $60 billion package being passed on the Congress of United States, and the director of CIA, Mr. Burns, said that it's just going to help Ukraine to survive until 2025. So how do you analyze the current standings on the battlefield in Ukraine?
No, Burns is wrong. I think Ukraine would be lucky to survive to the end of the summer, to August. $60 billion. Hell, send them $300 billion. Send them $1 trillion. It's not going to change the outcome of the war. Because, you know what, with $1 trillion, you can't buy a new soldier. Or maybe you could buy a mercenary somewhere, someone stupid enough to say, okay, yeah, I'll sign up, promise me $2 million, I'll come fight for you. And then they're going to wind up, blasted into mincemeat. Because Russia, I don't think, they didn't make a mistake. What they did, I describe it as they proceeded with the assumption that we're going to make a show of force initially that will be sufficient to bring Ukraine to the negotiating table and we'll have a negotiated settlement. Well, actually, that strategy worked because, as you recall, the peace negotiations there in Turkey, I think it took place in Ankara, succeeded. The Russians and the Ukrainians came to an initial agreement. The outlines still had to be, worked. The details needed to be worked out, but they'd come to an initial agreement. But then Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, Anthony Blinken, Joe Biden, and then they enlisted Boris Johnson, got into the mix and convinced Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to back out of the deal. On the very day, I think it was March 30th, March 31st, President Putin ordered the Russian military to withdraw. Remember, they had about a 24-mile tank column, armored columns. They occupied really the northern part of Kiev, just north of Kiev. Putin ordered that, okay, guys, withdraw as a sign of good faith. Okay, just to show you that we think these negotiations are headed in the right direction, they withdrew. 2 days later, April 1st, April 2nd, you had the atrocity in Bucha, where a bunch of Ukrainian civilians were murdered, and the bodies left littered in the streets. And the West hurriedly blamed that on Russia. This was a Russian war crime. Russia's committing criminal acts. Well, it was a lie. It was a damn lie, because the Russian forces had pulled out days before. Those people wound up dead. They were killed by Ukrainian forces. This was a Western-backed intelligence operation designed to smear Russia and promote Ukrainian prowess. The Russians then shifted to what we call an attrition theory of war. Their strategy was one of attrition, which means you're not fighting to hold territory. You're fighting to inflict as many casualties as you can on the other side. And if you need to tactically withdraw, you tactically withdraw. You're not going to sit there and put a line in the sand, oh, we got to hold this territory at any cost and lose as many men, no matter, we got to hang on to this territory. No, so that's why they pulled out of, first they pulled out of Kharkiv, and then their troops they were sitting on the west bank of the Dnieper River in Kherson. And at that time, General Surovikin ordered their withdrawal. Of course, he ordered that withdrawal with the permission of the General Staff, with Shoigu, Gerasimov. So the Russians come back across to the east side of the river, take up positions. Meanwhile, they're constructing 3 lines of defense because I think they have a pretty good idea of what's coming. And this is where, throughout this entire process, the West had no understanding of Russia's military capability. The West was locked into a narrative based upon false assumptions that go back to the 1990s. And in some instances, they even characterized the Russians as, still Soviet communists, which is, complete nonsense. And so that's where this whole thing, the Russians were running out of missiles. Well, nobody stopped to look on the West, apparently, to realize of all the countries in the world, the number one country in terms of natural resources, from, uranium, aluminum, pig iron ore, gas, oil, nickel, rare earth minerals, run down the list, nitrogen, is Russia. Russia doesn't have to go anywhere else to mine, produce what it needs in order to survive, in order to run industry. It's self-sufficient. The West failed to understand that. Russia did not destroy its industrial capability like the West did. The West sent a lot of it to Asia and to South America, Mexico. And so all of a sudden, Russia can flick a switch and crank up its industry, and all of a sudden, man, they were producing missiles, rockets, artillery barrels, artillery pieces, tanks, planes. You know, people talk about China's a massive, massive industrial giant. Yeah, it is. Except China can't produce its own aircraft, its own commercial aircraft. Russia can. Russia can produce and has produced commercial airliner that's going to be flying around, that is flying around Russia, that was built 100% with Russian parts. So this failure of the West to understand that Russia is not some weakling. That, you know, the former Senator John McCain described Russia as a country or a gas station masquerading as a country. Just stupid and arrogant, but you know, that's what he was, stupid and arrogant.
Yeah. So you have given recently a speech in United Nations Security Council. You talked about the attack on the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
And the situation was obviously a hot topic in the entire globe because the consequences of this could be serious, like it could be really massive. And from what we see, the global consensus on the subject is that the United States is responsible of what happened there, even though they were blaming Ukraine. But considering the scope of the operation, it's not expected for Ukraine to be pulling it off. So Germany is in the center of this topic, but they are basically sweeping it under a rug. They are not enjoying talking about the subject at all. But behind the closed doors, you think that the German decision makers have seen this subject as a reason to reconsider their relationship with the United States?
Oh no, and that's the unfortunate thing. They've been victimized by the United States. And they're doing nothing about it. I've described, I've been trying to get someone to do a political cartoon for me, which shows Olaf Scholz with a collar around his neck and a dog leash in the hand of Joe Biden, because that's what Germany is. They're a dog at the end of a leash, and they're drugged wherever the United States wants to drag them. They're going to do whatever the United States tells them what to do. They're going to eat what we tell them to eat. You know, that's humiliation for a country. There's no honor in that, but they're letting it be done to them. For what reason, I don't know, because the economic consequences of this attack on Germany have been profound. And Germany's failure to insist upon upholding the so-called international rules-based order. You know, how many pipelines run in and through Turkey? I think there's at least 3, maybe more.
3, yeah.
And so is Turkey if somebody blows up one of your pipelines, you're going to sit back and say, oh, well, don't know who did it, man. That's awful. Yeah. You folks would be correctly angry and demand to find out who did it and hold the people who did it accountable. And that's what we're not seeing here with Nord Stream. I mean, the crazies in the West thought that, we're going to hurt Russia with this. Oh, for God's sake. They blow up a pipeline, so all the pipeline is a delivery mechanism that Russia can provide Europe with cheap gas. All right, the pipeline is no longer there. Russia's still producing the gas out of the ground. They just have to ship it in different ways, which means the people that are doing the shipping they're going to get wealthy because they're making more money, and the consumers at the end of the line are going to pay more because the transportation costs were increased. You know, I said this is not like having to do advanced calculus. This is part of simple addition and subtraction. And so to that extent, it really hasn't hurt Russia economically, but it has hurt not only Germany, all of Europe, because they're paying more for gas. And when the prices go up, it ends up affecting the supply line. It ends up affecting jobs. You've had a number of factories closing in Germany that are moving out of the country to other places. What's just shocking is that the Germans are so willing to accept this. It's really a disgrace.
Yeah. So you said that Europe is doing basically whatever United States need them to do.
Well,
right now, China's chairman, Mr. Xi Jinping, is having a trip to Europe, and today he must be talking to Mr. Emmanuel Macron by now. And the main subject is obviously being a potential mediator for the war in Ukraine. But there's also another concern with China's situation with Taiwan and the United States decoupling from China in economic terms. Do you think that Europe is going to follow United States in decoupling, because their interests might be in jeopardy if they do so? What do you think about this?
Well, is everybody, lost their minds? Are they Alzheimer's patients? No memory left? Taiwan is part of China. Okay? That was the one China policy which the United States agreed to back in 1972. And as a consequence of that, Taiwan was no longer recognized as a country that could sit at the table at the United Nations. Taiwan is not a country. It is part of China. Accept that. Or if the West wants to say, no, we're no longer going to accept that, we want to go to war with China. All right, go ahead. The reality, China keeps being portrayed as this imperial power, keen on conquering the world. The only military operation they carried out outside of their borders in the last, 45 years was an attack on Vietnam, because Vietnam was attacking Cambodia. So China has not been an aggressive expeditionary military power sailing around the world, establishing Chinese military bases in Africa, in the Sahel, like the French, like the Americans, like the Brits. So the West is the one with the problem of what I'll call colonial encroachment, not China. So China's visit to Europe, one, talk to Macron, see if we can get Macron back on board to do something to maybe talk the Europeans into pursuing a serious negotiation with Russia. But then meeting with the Hungarians and the Croats, they basically have sided with the Russians. So he's just sort of, I think, reassuring those states that, hey, because you may feel isolated within the EC, because of your support for the Russian position, we got your back. I think that's one of the messages he's sending. So this, I think a lot of this hysteria that's whipped up about Taiwan is coming out of a Western need to create an enemy so they can justify, the United States is approaching $1 trillion a year defense budget. Unheard of. I think let's go back and let's deal with the facts. We agreed, our nation's leaders agreed 52 years ago that Taiwan is part of China, hence the one China policy. Let's live up to the agreements.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you about the United Kingdom. As we know, since the Suez crisis, we have seen United Kingdom taking a secondary place behind United States in front of the global theater in terms of influence. But there is always a talk about how the United Kingdom is way more powerful on influencing politics globally than it seems, and than how people perceive them as. So with the Syrian civil war, we have seen a serious intelligence war between Russia and United Kingdom. And now in the Ukraine, there are even reports that the intelligence branch of Ukraine's operations are conducted by more of MI6 than CIA. So do you agree with this, with those ideas that United Kingdom, with its economic powerhouse in London and with its intelligence powerhouse with MI6, has a way more influence around the world than what we think?
Well, the Brits, in my view, are like a nasty little chihuahua, little bitty dog, real ill-tempered, can't get along with anyone, and really irrelevant when it comes to it, but capable of really, creating some mayhem. So the Brits still fancy themselves as this global colonial power. They're not. They're a joke. Their Navy, they can't even operate their aircraft carriers. The ditto for their ships. One of their minesweepers ran into another minesweeper. They don't even know how to drive. They no longer know how to sell their boats and their ships. This from the country that established itself as a global sea power at one point. And so here they're doing everything they can to try to attack and provoke Russia. And they're doing it without any sense of control. But they don't have a lot of power. They're not an economic powerhouse. Hell, they're not, last I checked, I don't think they're even the top 10 in the world from the standpoint of GDP. They're a fading power. And like all fading powers, they're, thrashing about, like a drowning man. They may grab somebody and bring them under with them. But Britain's not going to turn it around. They've got a 70,000 man army. That's nothing. And they can't. Their tanks, the best, I guess, indicator of their military prowess. One of their Challenger tanks was bogged down in the mud. They drove out, sunk in the mud. They couldn't get it out. That describes Britain. So I don't doubt that they'd be very aggressive with the Ukrainians, but they're not writing the majority of the checks. I always believe in the principle, money talks, or the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rules, and in this case, the United States is the king of the golden rule. We're providing the bulk of the money. Ukrainians will listen to us before they listen to the Brits, just simply because we pay better.
Yeah, but what about their intelligence? Do you think their intelligence is on par with the CIA in terms of influence?
Well, in terms of human source intelligence, because really that's what MI6 and CIA are supposed to do, human source intelligence, it's generally crap. Neither side has a good penetration or assets inside Russian government, Russian military. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Who in their right mind in Russia would want to risk their life to spy for the Brits or the Americans? It doesn't make sense. Both countries have less freedom in many regards than Russia. Both sides engage with political persecution of political opponents, something they frequently accuse Russia of doing. Like Britain, Britain's a bit of a police state. You can get arrested. Think about this. You can get arrested for praying outside an abortion clinic, praying, not even speaking out loud, silently praying. You get arrested for a thought crime. So, what high level Russian officials are going to put themselves at risk that way? So from an intelligence standpoint, CIA and MI6 are largely irrelevant on that front. Where they are being maliciously effective is helping the Ukrainians plan covert actions where they are carrying out attacks against Russian targets inside Russia. Now, these aren't changing the war. All they're doing is just irritating the hell out of the Russians and making the Russians more intent on destroying the Ukrainians. But I think the age of MI6 and CIA has passed.
Okay. I want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
This is going to be about the upcoming elections in the United States. With the war still waging in Gaza, we have seen the polls of Biden administration is going lower than ever.
Yeah.
So there is a general expectation from the globe that Donald Trump is going to make a return in the November elections. So in a potential new Trump administration, what do you foresee for the foreign policies of the United States? Do you think that their relationship with Israel is going to change? Is it going to be bolstered? And do you think Trump is going to do what he promised to end the war in Ukraine in one day?
Yeah, I think he will end the war in Ukraine. I think he's going to push for a very strong reevaluation of NATO. But I don't think the policy on Israel will change much. Though Trump will pursue a different angle. He will be more keen on doing negotiations, say with Turkey, with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, trying to see what solutions can come up with. He's not a fan of Netanyahu, so which means Netanyahu will probably be dumped and gone by that point. But the majority of Israelis still support the basic policies that Netanyahu's been pursuing. So I don't see much change coming from U.S. policy in Israel, even if Trump comes in. If anything, the Republicans probably are more stalwart supporters of Israel, the Zionist movement, than are the Democrats. You have more Democrats who are hesitant to support Israel in the same enthusiastic way that Republicans are. So I think you will see a shift in the policy with China. It will be less insulting. What the United States is doing right now is just they're insulting the Chinese, and China's sick and tired of it. They said we're not going to be treated that way.
Yeah. Okay. This concludes our interview. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.